I was actually really looking forward to my next video because I had a series of subjects I was going to pick from, and they were all generally positive. It was going to be an upbeat, happy-go-lucky time, right? There was no Gen 5 OU hating planned at all, if you can believe it. As cathartic as that can be, of course, which I hope this video is in lieu of that. But yeah, I was planning on something like, oh, this Pokemon slash team slash set slash combination slash strategy slash metagame is super underrated and fun and cool and yeah, all that kind of jazz. But yeah, that did not happen because as I was planning, then I had to wait a couple days because my voice was not in a state to really speak at length, and that was because it was recently my friend's birthday, which meant karaoke, which meant I blew my voice out, and that's really not an exaggeration. I had to not talk so much the last couple days, much to the delight of everyone around me, I'm sure, haha. But yeah, I have very minimal singing technique. I won't say none. I have like one trick, but I really can't use it very much, which is fine because you don't want to be pulling out that trick more than is dramatically fitting anyway. Makes those moments hit even harder. But yeah, I am mostly substituting in a lot of passion, and that, which is obviously, the more fun and appropriate way to do karaoke. You don't really like when that person or those people who can actually sing, not that they sing at all, but that they really show off just how well they can sing, It's like, yeah, okay, we get it. And if the person doing that happens to be the birthday girl, you really can't say anything. But yeah, it was a great time, of course. I was just, my approach to passion is a combination of theatrics, which is just, super fun, and also volume, and the occasional bluesy growl. That's the aforementioned trick. But yeah, I really don't have control. Well, I can control it like once or twice, and then after that, because I don't really have any know-how or technique in that sense. So I'm really compensating via the aforementioned factors. And you do that for a couple hours, and yeah, you are not going to be able to talk so much after. You're probably wondering right now, Kev, what is your go-to karaoke song? And the answer is, of course, Mandy by Barry Manilow. Yeah, I do a great rendition of that. And also a couple others, of course, but that was my favorite. That and I'm Just Ken at the end. I mean, come on. That was necessary. Yeah, and the other thing that other viewers might be wondering is, does this guy ever get to the point? The ones who are not familiar with the channel, of course. It's like, oh, and even those who might be familiar with the channel, who just, I don't know, really like torturing themselves by listening to a guy who really loves rambling. Look at that girder just get eviscerated by that Typhlosion eruption. Isn't that beautiful? If you are the kind of person who listens to these videos as opposed to watching, then you are really not missing anything in this video. It's just that a girder switched into a Typhlosion eruption and got eviscerated. Anyway, so I know there are some other viewers slash listeners going, does this guy ever get to the point? I mean, Jesus Christ, he's just rambling about all this nonsense about karaoke. Like, I'm trying to hear about Scald. He's talking about Barry Manilow. And the answer to that, of course, is fuck you. Which is fitting, of course, because this video is all about Scald, and fuck you is exactly what Scald does in competitive Pokemon. It's like, oh, well, can I play Skillfate? Fuck you. No, Scald. Which, of course, is wonderfully timed with that, for those not watching, then Sneasel Swords Dance and would have won the game if it didn't get Scald Burned and then got Scald Burned. Hilarious. So, yeah, this video is about Scald, and the slightly vituperative tone of this video, starting with that whole little response to people who don't like that these videos take a million years to get to their point. That whole thing comes from not just reflecting the atmosphere, what playing against Scald is like, or if you want to take it even further, building your team to account for Scald. That is just as obnoxious. Although it doesn't quite have that same I want to throw my computer factor as getting Scald burned in game. So it's not just about Scald itself, but about to reflect the infuriating nature of arguing about this move. And I will just say this right now: if you do not believe Scald to be broken, you are wrong. I'm sorry, but normally in these kinds of tiering debates, there should be room for other opinions. And normally, yes, of course, you could even make a case that Cinderace wasn't broken in Gen 8 OU or something outrageous like that, I'm sure. And that would be like, okay, well, let's hear this person out. Maybe there's something to be said for it. But when it comes to Scald, I'm sorry, there should be no tolerance for that, because the anti-Scald arguments either come from a place of ignorance, in which case, I mean this as respectfully as possible, but that is really, then those kinds of opinions aren't really meaningful. It's like if you're debating if, I don't know, Salamence in DPPOU is broken, and some ladder player, some very low ladder player comes and goes, well, I use Weavile and Cresselia on my team, and I never lose to Salamence. It's like, oh, well, shit, I didn't think of that before, And the other anti-Scald arguments tend to be incredibly dishonest, and those are worse, actually, because they don't have the excuse of being ignorant. Now, that's mostly what draws my ire, and I know that element of arguing about Pokemon tiering is not specific to Scald itself, of course, but I find it particularly distasteful when it comes to Scald because of the RNG nature of the game. At least you can play around broken Pokemon to somewhat decent effect. But, when it comes to RNG, I mean, the whole point of it is that you're just you're flipping the coin and saying, let's see what happens. I don't know. So, yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover in this one. So, there are some people who are genuinely curious, like, oh, well, what makes Scald different from Lava Plume or Discharge or Sludge Bomb or whatever, and they genuinely mean it. It is good faith, and those kinds of arguments, I promise I'm not being aggressive towards. If you really do mean it, the problem is that some players really like playing with broken stuff because it's easy to win with. And if you think this is conjecture, I promise you, you know how many players out there have admitted to not wanting to ban something that was insanely broken because they loved using it so much and because it was so easy for them to win with? They are very on record. This is no secret. This goes back to, as far as I'm aware anyway, not even DP, Diamond and Pearl Garchomp, one of the most hilariously broken Pokemon of all time. And there were people going, oh, well, you can beat Garchomp technically if you do insert stupid thing here. And then later, players would be, oh no, of course, I was completely bullshitting. I wanted to use Garchomp. It was so easy to win with. So, I suspect that kind of thing is the case in a lot of Scald arguments, because you'll see this a lot, where when something broken or debatable or controversial, whatever, is trying to get banned, then you see a lot of otherwise perfectly intelligent players suddenly become these complete idiots who somehow cannot comprehend the issue that these players have with this game element. I mean, this goes to not just like RNG stuff, but even like, there's these people who suddenly become very, very holier than thou almost. Maybe that's not the right word. Very condescending. That's more more accurate. Like, oh, you have an issue with Genesect in Gen 5 OU? I don't know. I might just be really good, but I never have an issue with Genesect. Do you need me to help show you how you can deal with Genesect? Here's some examples. This has worked for me. I don't know. I'm just talking here, but and this play and. And some of those players are like genuine idiots who think that Rotom Heat is actually a good answer to Genesect and Tornadus Therian. But then there's other players who will actually go, oh, well, I never had a problem with Aegislash and XY. This was a real thing, by the way. Great players who were just like, oh, no, I don't see the problem. Aegislash doesn't. And I am making them sound like complete morons because I think history has vindicated that whole Aegislash was hilariously broken thing, just like Gen 5 Genesect, just like Diamond and Pearl Garchomp, and the idea of, or like Baton Pass, for example. These things that we look at now, it's like, yes, of course that was utterly insane. And you forget, at the time, it wasn't just idiots going, oh, well, I'm not really sure. And it's not the kind of person whose opinion just brushed aside. It's like, how does this good player really think this thing is okay? And then you realize, oh, well, because they like using it, because it's easy to use and win with. Obviously. And before you go, well, doesn't it hurt them if something's broken around? The answer is, not really. If you're good at using a broken element, then it's going to work in your favor more. Anyway, point being that there's a lot of stupid, infuriating arguments around this kind of thing, which you would think is very self-evident, but clearly not, whether people genuinely don't get it or pretend not to anyway. So yeah, that is why this video is a bit more on the confrontational side. And, while I'm, spitting in the face of idiotic viewpoints I really despise, then I may as well use this opportunity to mention one that pops up a lot in these kinds of debates. Actually, two that pop up in these kinds of debates, because this is relevant. Number one, the players who don't play the game, don't have experience, and yet feel the need to argue policy. I don't know why, because they like pretending they're in, high school debate or something, and nothing wrong with that, but a lot of the knowledge around these kinds of things are not something you can just, look up on the analysis. You can't just go, well, grass types resist Scald and use special attacks, therefore grass types can switch into Scald. It doesn't work like that. If you don't play the game, you are not going to understand this stuff, on average, most of the time anyway. But you get a lot of these debates clogged up by, there's the idiots who play and just don't get it, and then there's the idiots who don't play. Sometimes even intelligent people, but they won't understand why it is a certain way or why it's being argued a certain way because they don't play. There are people who never play any of the tiers they debate in and barely even know the generational mechanics, and yet they really love offering their opinion. And that kind of stuff clogged up Scald debates quite a lot. And and then there's the other thing, and this is actually kind of related to the that whole viewpoint about, oh, why does this video take forever to get to its point? Which I realize that we're approaching the 15-minute mark and we're still not on Scald itself. Don't worry, we'll get there. Patience. If nothing else, I hope these videos leave you with with a greater sense of patience as opposed to just instant gratification. Please, Daddy, feed me this content that allows me to understand this in the easiest way possible, so I don't actually have to look it up and understand it for myself. Christ on sale. Anyway, so the other kind is the person who will ask, oh, well, why do you get so upset over Scald or any other insanely broken thing? And the answer is because I give a shit. Try it sometime. It's getting me so annoyed that obviously there's not an unhealthy level. There is an unhealthy level of rage about these things, which I don't think I reach anymore. Obviously, if you get too wrapped up in these things, you can approach those levels. But there's the perpetually detached, I'm too cool for this shit kind of spectator who's constantly going like, why do you even care about this? you know? And that kind of person generally tends to be the type who feels guilty over having Pokemon as their hobby and won't let themselves actually enjoy it, which is sad, I agree. And so they feel the need to try and swat down anyone who is actually invested, like that's something you actually do. Yeah, which is as funny as it is hypocritical. Yeah, oh, there was something else. What was it? Yeah, I'll take my time figuring it out, just in case that wasn't clear. It might come back to me. I'm sure it would. I think that was the general idea, anyway. But yeah, whatever it was, it's not as important. So, Scald, why is it stupid? Well, anyone who's ever played the game against Scalds should understand that, right? For those of you who are still watching, you are about to see a quintessential example. Slowking, for those not watching, Slowking scalds into another Slowking, gets the burn immediately. Now the other Slowking also scalds and gets the burn immediately. And the first Slowking that got the burn already, still scalding just because, yeah, you gotta get that switch into something else as Slowking doesn't scald. And, oh, what's this? Slowking stays in on Druddigon. This actually, I think, highlights Scald's stupid nature perfectly. Slowking stays in on Druddigon, not to threaten it with Ice Beam, not to set up Future Sight, not to Thunder Wave it, not to Toxic it, whatever, but to go for a resisted move on the Druddigon, and 30% of the time, that would have worked. So, I hope you see where I'm going with this. It's a move that is so rooted in RNG that players are willing to use it over the stronger Surf. Right? So, okay, that in and of itself is not special, of course. We have other moves like this. We have Lava Plume, Discharge, Sludge Bomb. So let's just get that comparison out of the way right now. It's like, PKC, why is Scald not the same as Lava Plume? And for the purposes of this, I will assume that you are asking this in good faith and not being one of those experienced players who should really know better, but insists on it almost being like a concern troll, you know, one of the most despicable of all behaviors. Oh, that was what I was forgetting. Yeah, the whole thing where someone will exaggerate how annoyed someone is. It's like, really? Despicable behavior, bro? Is that really how you want to describe it? Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? Like, yes, I'm making a point. Good lord. So, the semantics of this stuff, infuriating. I mean, but again, it comes with the territory, so if this is annoying you to hear about, imagine what it's like in that Scald thread, which I'll pull up after this video for those watching. For those not, don't worry about it. Then there is genuinely a post in there where someone makes an anti-Scald post, and someone else responds with, "Hi, please calm down, I'm worried about your mental state." Like, which is so unbelievable on a number of levels. For, you know, to say nothing of the whole, like, do you really give a shit about his mental state, or are you just trying to piss him off? Which, of course, the answer is he's trying to piss him off. So, yeah, why is Scald not Lava Plume? Okay, think about it like this. Think about Scald, Discharge, Sludge Bomb, and even Body Slam, let's say, right? So, Lava Plume is a Fire-type move, right? What type is immune to fire? Or, sorry, immune to burn? Fire, right? So, you can switch to Lava Plume, or switch to a Fire type if you really need to dodge a Lava Plume burn that easily, right? And you can say, oh, well, not every Fire type switches into Lava Plume Heatran very well. And to that I say, you are absolutely correct. However, Heatran also has Will-O-Wisp. If Heatran really wants to burn you, it will. And you are not going to stop Heatran from burning you with Will-O-Wisp, if it really wants to, through any tactics that would not work against Lava Plume. Heatran is a very good Will-O-Wisp user. You know, Lava Plume is really just an extension of that. So, remember, when someone asks, why is Scald broken? It's not just one factor. It's a combination of a bunch of really dumb factors. And we will go over all of them. And together, they make Scald what it is, which is unique and not comparable to Lava Plume. Right? So, that alone should, give the idea. If Heatran wants to burn you, it will with Will-O-Wisp, right? And if you want to stop yourself from getting burned by Heatran, you are going to have to stop it with something like Poison Heal Gliscor, or Magic Guard Clefable, or, Rest, Hydration, Rain Dance, Manaphy, or Refresh on a Dragon or a Water type, or something right? Something that would work against Will-O-Wisp as well as Lava Plume, right? But Heatran is a Fire type, and that is to be expected from it in that regard. Now let's look at Sludge Bomb. There are Sludge Bomb poisons things, right? There are 2 types immune to poison: Steel and, of course, poison itself. And plenty of those are going to be able to switch into Pokemon that use Sludge Bomb, right? There are going to be some Pokemon that don't really like a Sludge Bomb poison, of course, but it's not going to be universal, right? Simple idea. Discharge. Oh, and obviously, if a Sludge Bomb Pokemon really wants to poison you, it will use Toxic. And you would guard against that the same way, right? So those are the replays I wanted to get. We'll switch over to this thread, which I posted in June 2015. Goodness gracious. Don't worry about reading the text on screen itself. I'm going to skim through it. But yeah, it's a very, very, very silly silly move. And we have some other threads we'll go through. But yeah, Discharge, same thing. Look, if that Electric type using Discharge really wants to paralyze you, it will use Thunder Wave, right? Now, let's think about the basic idea of Scald. Remember that whole thing about how Fire types are immune to Scald Burn? Or are immune to Scald Burns? Well, they are. Fire types are immune to Burns. Oh, Scald hits them super effectively? Oh, well, okay. So, it's not just the RNG influenced nature of it. It's the fact that the counterplay is limited, right? Now, this would not be a problem in and of itself if the Pokemon using Scald were not A, so ubiquitous, and 2, so good. I mean, they're ubiquitous because they're good, so, same difference. But water types are already among the best types in the game. Have been forever. And you basically give them this tool this RNG-based tool to make them even more difficult to answer. And the one type of Pokemon that is actually able to bypass this effect of burn is actually the type of Pokemon that water types are best at dealing with. So it's like, oh, well, I don't want to get burned by that Scald. Let me switch in my Fire type. That doesn't quite work. There are some examples of this that do work, of course. Like if you've got a specially defensive Talonflame or something, right? But by and large, that is the answer. Nobody's switching. That's talking about like really weak Scalds. Nobody's switching Talonflame to dodge a Scald from Specs Keldeo, for example. So, Scald is super effective against the type that blocks it, and it is very spammable, both in a team building sense, because it's going to be used on water types, which are spammed all the time, because water types are already insanely good. And note, for example, how Slowking, this is just an example off the top of my head, but how Slowking is so good in Gen 9, even without Scald, because Slowking just got it again. And it's like, oh, it does other things besides go for burns. Because whenever someone says, without Scald, waters wouldn't be as good, shut the fuck up. That kind of argument is so emblematic of someone either not knowing what they're talking about or just being dishonest. Because how could you possibly actually think that while still being competent? You have to pick one. Like in this very thread, in the Scald thread, someone goes, what would Swampert do if it didn't have Scald? Like, are you serious? It's fucking Swampert. It was very good way before Scald existed. So, water types get to spam burn against a Pokemon, which is very good because fire types don't want to switch into them, obviously. Water types are everywhere. because water types are innately good, and Scald is very spammable, not just in the team builder, but in an in-game sense, because the opponent is not going to have a ton of options to switch into it. That's also a team builder restriction, but also because Scald is not exactly a weak move. 80 base power is nothing to sneeze at. So it's very easy to just go for Scald, go for the safe move every time, and you will be rewarded for it. That's why people don't like Scald. Oh, well, among the other reasons mentioned. But the thing is that Scald always rewards the safe play too much. Think about the numbers on Scald for a second. 30%. Okay, that's already a lot. Anyone who knows competitive Pokemon at all knows that 30% is fucking huge, right? But if you need one of two Scalds to burn, so let's say Ferrothorn switches in, you Scald once, and then you're going to Scald it again because you're faster. You only need one of those two burns to land, one of those two turns to have a burn land on it. That's a 51% chance. That is a coin flip slightly in your favor for just two uses of Scald. Those are insanely high numbers on a Pokemon type, the water type, that is going to switch into battle a lot. Waters are very good defensively. Even the offensive ones are good defensively. That's part of what makes them so good. And water is also an amazingly spammable type offensively, as Keldeo and many others have demonstrated. So you basically let them spam their stab move, which they're already going to be spamming just for the damage and the coverage, and you let them burn on top of that an incredibly high amount of the time. If Scald was way weaker in base power, or its burn rate was 10 or even 20%, then it would not be deserving of this whole brouhaha around it. But all these things come together to make this very nasty, very safe move that you can just click it and win every time. Or basically, not necessarily win because you're not always going to get the burn, of course, but you're never really going to lose. You're always giving because you just need it to land once most of the time. Or no, pretty much all the time, barring it's the exception when you need it to land multiple times. Not that that's tough anyway, but water types are going to switch in over and over and over again and spam the move over and over and over again, and the options for dealing with that kind of thing are very limited. Because burns are nothing, people say, oh, use special attackers, which, make no mistake, the anti-Scald arguments are all pretty dumb, but that one's really dumb. When someone says, oh, well, Latios is a special attacker who doesn't mind burn, it's like, yeah, I'm sure Latios doesn't mind the extra chip damage. Even in Gen 7, I'm more sympathetic to the anti-Scald argument because it's only 6.25 per turn, but at the same time, it's still very restrictive, and 6.25 is still not nothing. So I for the record, I do think Scald is still unbelievably stupid in Gen 7. My opinion, in Gen 8, that one really, I still think the game would be better without it, make no mistake. I think other people have started to make that argument too, which made me happy. But, I think it's the damage. Would it be too bad if it was doing 0 damage? That's an interesting discussion, but it doesn't. So, 6.25 is still unreasonable on top of the burn. Now, and I mean, even in actually, no, I'm going to stay on topic. Because RBY burns used to be, oh, you don't want to burn things, and then Fire Spin Agility Moltres was like, actually, I do want to burn that Starmie, because then with Fire Spin I get to beat it. But that's something else. Or Chansey or whatever. So, special attackers somehow dealing with it is really dumb, because if you want to make dealing with the special attacker easier, burning it would actually help a little bit, just a little. And things like Lumberry or Natural Cure, like they might be good for dealing with individual burning Pokemon in certain situations. I mean, Lumberry, no, because Scald is a long-term move most of the time. So you want to throw that one-time ass solution at it, then enjoy not winning. Natural Cure, that's a better one, but not every Natural Cure Pokemon is A, good, or B, good at switching into Scald users. Like have fun switching Chansey into Keldeo, for example. So, in summation, look, Scald is on too many good Pokemons, and too many good Pokemon, and the odds are too high for something so strong, with such a devastating effect. It's too easy to play safe and be rewarded. and this is what I mean when I say someone would say it minimizes skill. Obviously, you can use Scald skillfully. You can use anything in the game skillfully. That is not a reason to not ban something. You know, it's like, oh, well, you can use, you could, my go-to example is always, if you had a Landorus Incarnate in Gen 6 OU, and the opponent had an Assault Vest Tornadus Therian as their check, and you had Rock Slide on that Lando, or Pursuit as a teammate, whatever, then it would take skill for you to be able to remove that Torn T. That did not mean Landorus was not insanely broken. Same deal with something like Scald. It is... there's so many arguments. I'm tripping over myself getting to all of them. Here's a couple more. Here's a really, really dumb one. Oh, well, something like Ferrothorn will be broken without Scald. Yeah, nobody can make this argument in good conscience because no good player or team relies on Scald to beat Ferrothorn, or exclusively on Scald or anything. Not to mention that if your method of dealing with Ferrothorn is, hoping you get lucky like that, first of all, a good player is going to keep their Ferrothorn away from Scald more often than not, specifically because of that. So, I deal with Ferrothorn by Scald. Okay, well, the opponent isn't going to switch their Ferrothorn into your Scald. Oh, well, I guess I'm fucked then. That is not how that works. That is a bullshit non-argument that was made up by people who don't know what they're talking about, or by people who are looking for bullshit reasons to not get rid of Scald. It's unbelievably stupid. What was the other one? I think I mentioned it in the thread. Yeah, there were, that was another thing. I remember pre-Scald, or pre this thread, then I made, I was looking in the IRC channel for SPL. Yeah, it was old, it was 2015. And so many good players were complaining about how restrictive Scald was, how unbelievably warping the effect was, how detrimental it was to skill expression, and all that kind of stuff. And then this thread came around, they were like, what a preposterous idea. So, I don't know what changed for them. It was unbelievable. Yeah, effectively, another good way of thinking about it, I think this argument was made in this thread, was imagine if every water type got Will-O-Wisp. I am not inherently opposed to water types burning things if they have Will-O-Wisp, like in the case of Rotom Wash or Jellicent, or let's say Steam Eruption Volcanion. I'm fine with it being an exception on a water type. That is part of what gives them their niche. That's okay as long as they're not broken, right? But if it's on every water type, that starts to be too much, because the options for dealing with water types already limited, famously so, as demonstrated in the previous generations. Options for dealing with water types that can burn, that's a whole different story. That is just... for those of you... here's a great example, actually. Think about how irritating Toxapex is in Gen 7, right? And how limited the options are for dealing with it. Imagine if Toxapex couldn't burn you. Imagine if you could just launch Kartana into it, or whatever, or Magearna, right? That would make dealing with Toxapex a million times easier. A million. So, that's the other... the other thing, Bada Bing made a great point, was that, yes, Scald is not automatically KOing everything. Well, I mean, it may as well destroy things to the point of making them worthless, but it's really up to us to determine how much, quote-unquote, I guess that's Pokemon elements we want at the highest level of the game. Because if you want the game to be competitive, then you don't want elements like these where someone can get bailed out for just spamming the safe move over and over, or for throwing a Hail Mary. It's way too consistent as a Hail Mary. That's part of the problem. It's that it's too spammable, it's too easy to play safe with it, and it's too easy to get bailed out by it. Scald is just too good, pretty much. The one thing that Scald is good for is, of course, thawing you out of an unfortunate freeze. Unfortunately, it doesn't outweigh all the other stuff. But that was the other thing. Some players would... I think I made it in the original post I argued. Oh yeah, this was completely ignored because... good. Yeah. Oh, and then there were like dumb posts like this, like use Healing Wish to deal with Skull, which is just cool. Yeah. So what's that post that 20-year-old me? Oh yeah. We don't accept. I mean, look. There's another thing actually. This goes back to something I said earlier in the video, where some players are like, oh, why do you care about this kind of stuff? That can be both a sideline kind of thing, or even a competitive player might say that kind of stuff, because some players, bless them, will play any metagame you give them without complaint. They don't care. They think all metagames are equally, broken or non-broken, but for those who can envision a better metagame and care about it, then stuff like this happens. So, apologies or whatever. Not really. Anyway, so the point of this being, if there is something that is excessively influencing the metagame in terms of RNG, which I don't think anyone could make the argument that Scald is excessively influencing the metagame in terms of RNG to a negative, detrimental effect, then we should get rid of it. That is part of tiering policy. We will not accept every probability factor introduced into the game. Evasion, Oko, and Moody are examples. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Kev, Scald is not those things. I agree, of course. However, consider this. Landorus Incarnate is not as broken as Primal Groudon, right? Nobody could make that argument. Nobody. So, either everything has to be as broken as Primal Groudon for it to get banned, or not everything that gets banned is on the same level. I think that's so. And since we operate on that kind of logic, where even though, let's say, what was the last thing that got banned in Gen 5? Okay, Landorus Incarnate in Gen 5 was not as broken as Darkrai, for example, or Skyman. Does that mean we say, oh, well, it wasn't as broken as these things, so we don't? No, because that's a nonsense argument. If Scald is too much, then it's too much. It's using the same kind of logic that this influences the game via luck too much, not this influences the game via luck just like Evasion did. Scald is not ripping the game out of your hand to that level, but it is an incredibly limiting factor both in the team builder and in the battle. Yes, I also talked about the intellectually dishonest comparison to Lava Plume, Body Slam, Discharge Sludge Bomb. Yeah, Body Slam, I didn't mention that one earlier, but, I mean, if you really want to... First of all, Body Slam kind of sucks. Second of all, it has immunities to, well, you can't even paralyze electric types with it in Gen 6 and later. And it also has an immunity in Ghost. So, and, yeah, so you get what I'm getting at. So, and also the users of these other moves. Well, I've already made those arguments, so. Yeah, team building options go up, battles improve because, here's the example. Mega Venusaur switches into Keldeo on a Surf, your Switchin is getting attacked by the Mega Venusaur, and then you're in trouble. If Mega Venusaur gets scalded and burned, then now has to recover, and switching around it is a million times easier. And Scald just rewards this, again, the safe move. So here's an example Heist put forward. Let's say you have a Keldeo versus Heatran. They've got a Venusaur. Rather than doubling to Pinsir or whatever on the Venusaur, you can just Scald and win either way. If the Heatran stays in, then obviously you destroy it. And if Venusaur comes in, you can still burn it. So it's safe either way. So, yeah, then there's obviously things like Magic Guard, but Magic Guard Pokemon are not automatically good into every Scald Pokemon. Like, if you want to use Clefable to counter Keldeos and Manaphy's, then have fun. So, I mean, obviously you can do things like use Poison Heal Gliscor to switch into Toxapex or Alomomola or whatever, but it's not always going to work. And it's just... well, all the other things that are mentioned. Heal Bell, another difficult thing to work. Burns aren't even that bad. Successful attackers, that's also nonsense. Yeah, so that is pretty much everything. I will conclude this video by mentioning how Gen 6 UU hated Scald so much. One of the replays from earlier, if you were watching, was from Gen 6 UU, and it was just, Scald nightmare. And even in this original Scald thread, I will provide links in the pinned comment. Then Iron Bullet, one of the most prominent UU players, he talked about one of the nastiest dynamics in Gen 6 UU, a dynamic that is not exclusive to Gen 6 UU, by the way, is that how answers to waters were so limited that oftentimes your best option was just dealing with the opposing water with your own water and hoping, to win the Scald War, and things like that have existed in Gen 5 Ubers, or Gen 5 Uber, well, that too, but Gen 5 OU, for example, like Tentacruel on Tentacruel is just the worst thing ever. It's horrifying. And so Gen 6 UU hated it so much that they tested a Scaldless ladder, and there were actually, again, many good players. Like if you look at that original Scald thread, there were guys like Badass and ABR talking about how horrible Scald is, and then Nails was a big anti-Scald proponent, as you see here, just trying to get rid of it. And yeah, so Gen 6 UU did test, not a real test, but they ladder without Scald, and everyone was like, oh my god, how am I going to deal with Haxorus or whatever, because when I can't burn it? It's like, if your method of dealing with Haxorus is a Scald burn, you deserve to lose. So, wow, I got really hyped up. Cool. Yeah, that was pretty much it. So there were a lot of good anti-Scald arguments in this thread that I will leave for you to read, because I think I've said my piece in this video. And pretty much I remember this was kind of like the no Stealth Rock ladder at the end of Gen 5, where people were like, this actually opens up the game in a really healthy way. This is good. So, yeah. Oh, and finally, Pack has been keeping Oris UU alive almost single-handedly over the last couple of years by writing these wonderful posts about the intricacies of the tier. It's beautiful stuff. Makes me want to do a video about Oris UU, which someone asked me to do recently. So I think I might just because reading his musings on the tier is just so wonderful. But he has this dedicated post about how a lot of the grass types in Oris UU are not actually good switch-ins to the waters in Oris UU because of Scald. O-code by Scald is an actual term used. And I mean, you can see parallels to this in lots of other tiers. I mean, have fun switching your Tapu Bulu into a Scald in Gen 7 OU, for example. So, yeah, links to all these in the pinned comment. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. And I gotta say, for all that anger and annoyance of Scald and stupid arguments surrounding it, I feel a lot better now. So sometimes it is good to delve into unpleasant, obnoxious territory and just don't avoid it. Just go all the way through, and then you're better off for it. I feel cleansed. I'm gonna go watch a cool samurai movie or something. Feeling good for having gotten that weight off my chest. Thank you so much for watching / listening. I hope this was enjoyable / informative / cathartic or whatever for you. And yeah, fuck Scalds. Get it out of every tier it exists in, including Gen 9 OU. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, at least Slowking Future Sight Chili Receptioning wasn't the worst because it wasn't bringing Scald with it, but now, I mean, and Alomomola, Scald, and Flip Turn? Horrifying stuff. So, but again, if horror movies have taught me one thing, you cannot look away from the horror. You have to look at it, experience it, and then you'll be better off. Thank you once again. I will see you in the next one.